Right, so we're going to start looking at phobia characteristics. What actually is a phobia? What does it look like? So there's a few things that you need to know. You need to know behavioural characteristics, so how do we act if we have a phobia? You need to know emotional characteristics, so how do we feel if we have a phobia? And also cognitive characteristics. How do we process information? What is our thinking like if we are having a phobia or if we've got a phobia? First thing we're going to have a look at is the behavioural characteristics. So how do we act if we have a phobia? And if you have a think of someone who has a spider phobia, then the first thing they're going to show is usually panic. Okay, person might start crying. They might scream at the sight of a spider. They'll start to run away, sprint out of the room, run downstairs, get as far away from it as possible. Some people might freeze. Okay, so they'll just stop as soon as they see a spider, unable to move. Their muscles will start to tense up and they'll be unable to actually leave that scenario. So panic is one of the main things. Okay, if someone has a phobia, they will show panic. Different people show different symptoms depending on how they are, who they are, what their personality is. But panic is one of the main things and one of the main behavioural characteristics of a phobia. Well, another behavioural characteristic of having a phobia is avoidance. Okay, you'll try and avoid the phobia as much as you can. You'll try and stay away from it. You'll try and not go near it. You'll do anything in your power to make that happen. And this can make life exceptionally difficult. If you think about someone who's got a fear of public toilets, then if they go to work or if they go to school and they have a fear of public toilets, they can't use those toilets at all. They've got to either go home every time they need to use the loo and then come back to work, or wait until they get home, which can make life exceptionally uncomfortable if you were dying to go to the toilet. So avoidance is one of the big characteristics that makes up a phobia. The final behavioural characteristics is endurance. Okay, and this is when people will stay in the presence of the stimulus. Okay, but they'll experience exceptionally high levels of stress. And sometimes this is unavoidable, such as someone who has a phobia of flying. They'll be on a plane, they can't escape the plane, but they will experience really high levels of anxiety and stress while they're on that plane. So we've got these three different behavior characteristics. We've got panic, where you might cry, scream, or freeze. We've got avoidance. You'll do everything in your power to avoid being near the phobic stimulus. And also endurance. The third one being endurance, where you will stay in the presence of the stimulus, but you'll experience exceptionally high levels of anxiety. The emotional characteristics of a phobia is how we start to feel. And anxiety is the big one. Phobias are an anxiety disorder. If you were to look up how they're actually classified, they are classified as an anxiety disorder. So the obvious emotional characteristic is you show anxiety. You'd be very scared, you'd be worried, you'd be nervous. If you think about someone who has a phobia of snakes and they knew there was a snake right outside the door, then of course they're going to be anxious. They're not going to be able to relax, they're not going to be calm. And it's exceptionally difficult for that person to remain positive. They might be a really positive person most of the time. If they knew that the phobic stimulus, the snake, was outside that room, then of course they're going to be anxious. And a lot of the time they're going to show fear. Fear is that immediate response to seeing the stimulus. As soon as they see the snake, they show that fear. The anxiety, the fear that comes with actually seeing the phobic stimulus itself. So we're going to have a look at a little example using Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings has arachnophobia. He has an exceptional fear of snakes. And Mr. Hastings also has a membership to London Zoo. So he likes to go there often. But they have a big spider expedition there. So he knows he's going somewhere that has something he is exceptionally afraid of. And he's very anxious. The day leading up to it, traveling down on the tube to the zoo, he is very anxious of the spiders. He's showing this emotion. Okay, he's worried, he's anxious. And as soon as he sees the spiders, because he's got to walk through it, he's got to walk through that little spider sanctuary in order to get to where he wants to go, he shows fear. He sees the spiders, he's showing fear straight away. He's scared. Okay, and it's physically visible on his face and in his body language as well. But he's feeling fear, he's feeling anxiety. And it's these responses, they are completely out of proportion to the actual danger posed. If you look at the size of Mr. Hastings, he's a big rugby player. If you look at the size of a tiny little spider that he's afraid of, there's not much danger being posed there. And that's one of the key characteristics of a phobia. The responses that you have and the fear that you have is usually completely disproportional to the actual dangers posed by the phobic stimulus themselves. So if we just have a quick recap, those key emotions that determine and distinguish a phobia: the anxiety and the fear. The immediate response, once you see the stimulus, is the fear, and the anxiety is all of that anxiousness, that nervousness leading up to seeing it, like Mr. Hastings and his spiders. The cognitive characteristics are all related to what's going on inside our brain. How are we processing information? What are we actually doing with the information that's coming to us? And one of the big things about a phobia is people are aware that their fear is excessive. Mr. Hastings knows that that tiny little spider is not going to cause him much danger. Okay, he is completely aware of that. And that's an important characteristic of phobias. And it's really what distinguishes it from schizophrenia. Schizophrenics aren't generally aware of their condition, whereas people with a phobia are fully aware that their fear is excessive. Okay, and they have selective attention to the phobic stimulus. They find it really, really difficult to look away from it. So if you see a spider and you're afraid of spiders, sometimes people can't take their eyes off it. Okay, and one of the reasons for that might be that you're looking to see it stays where it is. You don't want that spider climbing up the wall, jumping across onto your face. Okay, so you look at it all the time to make sure you know it's staying where it is. And people also hold very irrational beliefs. If you look at the phobia of flying, for example, it is one of the safest forms of transport there is. You have car crashes all the day, you have bicycle accidents every single day, whereas flying is a relatively safe form of transport. And if you give them statistics to show them this, people will ignore it. Okay, they will still have their phobia of planes. They don't take statistics into consideration, and they hold irrational beliefs, even though there's evidence to show that maybe your fear is a little bit extreme or excessive. And also, people have sometimes, in quite extreme cases, cognitive distortions, where they think that something is actually something else. It's completely distorted in their mind. So they might think that spiders are actually aliens, or any insect is actually an alien from another planet that's come down here in order to attack us. So something going on inside their brain has said, right, spiders aren't actually spiders. They're something completely different. They pose a much bigger threat. They're actually aliens that are coming to get us. So something's gone on in their information processing that has resulted in them having this distortion of information. It's clearly not real, but some people in extreme phobias really do think that's the case. If we have a quick recap then of those key words you should have down for the cognitive characteristics. People are aware. Mr. Hastings knows his fear of spiders is completely irrational. The danger posed by them is completely irrational to his fear. Some people show selective attention. They'll only be able to look at that particular thing if it's in the room. Irrational beliefs. You've got the idea that even though trains and planes are a really, really safe form of transport, if we look at statistics, people ignore you. It's irrational. They don't follow any statistics or any logic. And also, in the very extreme, you have these cognitive distortions. Now, what you are afraid of, you've completely distorted in your mind. You've changed it into something that is going to cause you fear, such as insects being aliens. Of course, that's going to make you a bit more worried than it being a tiny little insect.